Merry Christmas, metalheads of the internet. Just a very quick reminder that we are hosting our very special Christmas and holiday live stream December 26th at approximately 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Drinks, video games, special guests, goofy goodness. Also, every dollar that you donate to the Metal Meltdown during the live stream, I will match and give to the Fort York Food Bank. Also, every time you donate, everyone on the Metal Meltdown, myself, Anna, any special guests we have at that time, we drink. Santa has already promised to make a nice donation. I recommend you do the same. Open up your hearts and wallets. But even if you don't donate, that's fine. Just tune in, say hello, enjoy the party. I hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope you had a good Christmas, and I hope the rest of your Christmas holiday season goes well. Yeah, cool. All right, on to the video.
Good morning, metalheads of the internet, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Metal Meltdown. Today we're talking about some of the best metal and rock supergroups of all time, and to help me figure out who the best metal and rock supergroups of all time are, I have the Metal Triss, a fellow YouTuber and someone who works behind the scenes for record labels and PR companies. Say hello! How are you? Act as if we haven't literally just been talking for like 15, 20 minutes.
Wow, it's such a great thing to see you, for the first time. And
for the first time ever. Never spoken or seen each other beforehand.
No, man, it's really, really cool. And like I was saying before we were chatting, I'm just really crap at this like collaboration thing. So I'm very, very appreciative for you inviting me on the channel, which is really awesome, man. Like I really do love your channel. I think you're doing a lot of really good things. And the level of like content that you get out, man, I'm just like, wow, I really wish I had the energy to do that.
I wasn't expecting this level of flattery right off the bat. Holy shit. I mean, I won't object. Thank you. Awful kind of you. Sometimes I wonder how I keep up with shit, honestly. I mean, I told you like before we were recording, like, oh, my work life and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, just
yeah, it's hard, man.
People look at me like, hey, man, you want to go out? And I'm like, no, I got to edit this thing and then I'll go out. Like,
yeah, exactly. I'll go out in like 6 hours once I've edited this video. Yeah.
Oh, God. I hate like the reviewing every Paradise Lost album video took way longer than it had the right to take. Like that broke my brain a little bit. It took a while to record and a while to edit. And like none of y'all tuned in, even though you asked for it. Even though like all y'all asked for it, but that's okay. I'm not going to be salty. People still liked it. Best metal supergroups. Bands where, maybe they haven't been around the longest, but they're comprised of famous, talented people who you may recognize from other bands. Maybe those bands have toured the world and won Grammy Awards or whatever the shit. I would hope you all know what a supergroup is by now. I mean, I would hope so. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very succinct sum up of what a supergroup is, for sure.
They should put that in the Wikipedia summary. I just nailed it. Definitely. But yeah, it's bands where like you already know, or at least if you listen to rock and metal, you could already know. I mean, I think about like Cream way back in the day, which had like Eric Clapton and shit, like probably one of the first examples of like a quote super group, or even like Crosby, Stills and Nash, I think it was the Highwaymen that had like Johnny Cash and George Harrison and like all these big names. So we're going to talk about the best metal supergroups, the best bands that have famous people in them. Would you like to start, good sir, with a really great metal supergroup?
Sure. I'll go for an easy one off the bat, which is Kill or Be Killed.
Yeah, you can't argue with the talent. You can't argue with the skill there. You just can't.
It's just amazing. Like I remember, the first. I think it was of Wings of Feather and Wax. That song. It just like that chorus is just absolutely incredible. Like for me, I really love Greg's kind of vocals on that song, but then you've got the sort of like kind of thing going on from Troy Sanders, and then the riffing from Max Cavalera. Like I think one of the biggest things for me is about a supergroup is it shouldn't sound like an amalgamation of all of their bands, but little bits of the bands that they've been in, but as something completely new that, you have like a different sort of offering for. What do you reckon?
Yeah, I really like Kill or Be Killed. I mean, I remember when that album came out in like 2014, I think it was.
Yeah, I think you're
And
about
I remember like just being like, holy shit. Like, I mean, Max Cavalera, Soulfly Sepultura, Greg from the Dillinger Escape Plan, Troy from Mastodon, Dave Ellich from the Mars Volta. And even on the second album, there was still like plenty of supergroup talent there. Like you had Ben Kohler from Converge. And I think it was the bassist from Torch, I think they had at that time. I'm going to
I think
double
so.
check. I know that there've also been some other changes behind the scenes to my knowledge. Uh, no, it was just Ben Kohler. Okay, maybe it was like a live guitarist they had. The point is, like, this is a super group through and through. I mean, yeah, again, Soulfly, Mastodon, Dillinger Escape Plan, Converge, fucking the Mars Volta. And with everything they've done, you can hear a lot of those elements like in the sound. I mean, of feather of weathers of thing and of wing feathers of fucking shit. How do I fucking my
Wings
brain
of
is
Feather
broken all of a
Wax, right?
sudden. My brain is broken all of a sudden. Wet wings of feather and wax.
There
Cool.
you go.
Got it. Why was that so difficult? But yeah, with that song specifically, you know, you have that chorus that wouldn't be out of place on a Dillinger Escape Plan record, especially like when they're in their Faith No More worship era.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you have these more primal rhythms and Troy's like grunting vocals where it's like, okay, this does kind of feel like Mastodon. This does kind of feel like a more progressive take on Soulfly. And it's really cool. And not even just that. I mean, that's like the lead single from that first album, and it's still one of their best fucking songs. But consistently across both the albums, I mean, there's thrash and there's prog and there's groove metal and all these more erratic elements and vocal textures and displays. Like, it's an amazing combination of like all of their talent.
Yeah, man. You're absolutely right. You know, it's just, but you know, the most important thing is that it is something different. I think that you're hearing, and it's almost kind of like a metalhead relay. You know, because each song, you're kind of like, oh, well, maybe Max had a little bit more to do with that kind of track. Like, I think isn't there a song called, I'm gonna have to like use my handy Wikipedia now, and I think there's a song called like Landmine Marathon or something like that. Is that right?
I'm gonna take your word for it because I'm looking at something else extra real quick. I very shamelessly also have my Wikipedia and Spotify open, so I'm like, just to make sure I'm not talking out of my ass when it comes to some of these bands, and I'm like, oh, fun fact, Ozzy was in this band. It turns out he wasn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Well, that's the thing, you know, you can't know everything about everything. Do you know what I mean? And especially when it's supergroups, it's often quite, you know, specific. So I think it was IED that I was thinking of. But there's also Reluctant Hero, which was the second album, well, you know, which is a little bit different from, you know, the first album, but not quite as good, I didn't think. But, you know, like, it's pretty hard to get that level of quality on the first record, if you ask me, to be fair.
Sometimes that's kind of why, like, I notice sometimes supergroups are more of a one and done thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I think about some of the, I mean, who knows, maybe they'll come up later in this video. When I think about like big name rock supergroups, there's like Velvet Revolver, who only had 2 albums, Them Crooked Vultures, who only had 1.
Yeah.
Chicken Foot, which I was never a fan of, but whatever. They only had 2 albums, but I mean, some of those guys still collaborate elsewhere. And I even like Nail Bomb in the 90s. Like, sometimes it's just like a one and done thing, and you know, that's it. It's very rare you see them like kind of really continuing, with some exceptions, one of which I'll be naming very shortly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things where, like, I guess logistically you have to think about all of their schedules as well. You know, like, there's only so many times that the stars can all align and everyone can kind of have enough time to, you know, because you don't necessarily have to be in the same room, but you know, it takes time to write this music and all that sort of stuff. And that's usually why, you know, it'll be like the space of 10 years between each album, because they're just too busy doing all the other stuff.
On that note, I shall move on maybe to another metal supergroup. This one is interesting because it's also at the same time kind of a spin-off or an offshoot of a pre-existing metal band. Heaven and Hell, British-American heavy metal supergroup featuring several former members, or current really members, of Black Sabbath, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, Vinnie Appice, Ronnie James Dio, all big Black Sabbath names, but of course Dio, also from Rainbow, also has his solo career. Vinny Appice as well. I mean, he's been in a bunch of bands. Like I'm looking at his kind of discography right here. Kill Devil Hill, a band called Wami, which I don't think I've ever even heard of. Last in Line. I mean, these are all massively, monumentally talented dudes. Essentially a continuation of like the Dio era Black Sabbath, but with like a full-on doom metal kind of vibe and feel. Like they only put out one album. Dio passed away shortly after. I think they were touring, and he passed away shortly after. But man, that one album is full of fucking bangers. Bible Black is unironically one of the best Black Sabbath or Black Sabbath adjacent songs ever made. One of Dio's best vocal performances. It's harrowing, it's ominous, it's epic. A lot of other great stuff just across the record. Like it just reeks of like doom and hell and like pain and agony. Like it's a little weird to think that that's like the same band that, or the same band, quote unquote, that was like making songs like The Wizard back in the day, you know, like, because it's just like so much heavier and so much darker.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I remember the first thing I thought of is it's The Devil You Know, I think the album that you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I remember when I saw the artwork, that's what was like most striking about it. You know, back in the day where like you'd actually go to a record shop and see CDs and all that sort of stuff. Like, and obviously you wouldn't have streaming or whatever. And I had no idea what it sounded like, but I was like, whoa, I want to listen to whatever that red world has got inside it, because that looks fucking evil, like properly evil.
If I saw that album in a record store today and didn't know anything about heaven and hell, but like I was still the Metal Meltdown, my first instinct is to look at that and go, that looks like some gnarly blackened death metal, or like symphonic black metal. Because like you have this like grandiose, he has all these textures and features on his face, like the kind of tentacles coming out of his mouth, and like the kind of like monstrous teeth, and he's got horns, and he's holding up like a torch or a weapon of some kind. He's holding up something, and like he's just standing in this dark, cavernous kind of like landscape. Like it's so fucking like, it's just fucking evil. Like
man,
and there's like there's images of like people on crucifixes in the background. I kind of forgot about that. I'm looking at that now. Jesus Christ, but my mom would not like that.
I think it's also kind of a bit Lovecraftian, you know, that sort of other sort of world that we don't really sort of, because I feel like you can't really see his face as well. I'm kind of going off memory here, but it's sort of like almost a bit like Hellraiser in some ways.
You can see his face, but there's a lot of like heavy shading, and it's like dark red. And it's like his face is basically like, I think about like the mouth of Sauron from like the Lord of the Rings. But if he were a Cthulhian creature, like that's kind of what this kind of looks to me as, you know, especially with like, again, the tentacles coming out of his mouth. He looks like it looks like there might be like blood or like hair, or even like, I don't know, even like rotting tissue on him as well. Cause you see these strands coming off his arms and chest. Like I don't know what exactly it is, but I mean, yeah, just seeing that. I think I remember seeing that in like an old HMV here in Toronto, like, or like an old Sunrise Records way back in the day, and picking that up. Cause I remember I bought it in college, cause like I had like 50 minutes to kill. So I was just like, I'm going to go buy records instead of studying or whatever. Like I was a dumbass, still am, but whatever.
It's always a good decision to go buy records instead of study for me.
Agreed. No, to all the children watching in high school, college, like don't study, buy records. To all the parents watching, let your children buy records. They won't have money for drugs. Trust me. No, but this thing's just positively fucking evil. I mean, you can't go wrong when you have, I mean, literally Dio and basically Black Sabbath in its entirety. Like, how much more super does it get than that, honestly?
Yeah, man. And the songs are really great as well. You know, like you said, they have that sort of like evil atmosphere, but I feel like there's a little bit of like melancholy in there as well. But yeah, you're right. It's just a lot darker. And also, I just feel like a bit more high tech in some ways, you know, like it's the guitar tones are obviously very different because of the time and everything like that. But it just felt like it was kind of like even more metal than like
which is interesting too, because Black Sabbath, they've all kind of talked about like, we don't really like the term metal. Like Ozzy said something of that to Ozzy said something similar recently where he was like, I've never really felt comfortable being called metal. And Black Sabbath have kind of distanced themselves from being metal. Whereas with Heaven and Hell and the Devil You Know record, it's like, oh no, this is metal. Like, there ain't no way you're listening to that record going like, oh, that's a wonderful classic 70s rock album. No way. Maybe with Paranoid you're doing that, but definitely not with the Devil You Know. Definitely not. Unless you were listening to some fucked up shit back in the 70s.
Oh, mate.
All right. How about another supergroup for us, Tristan? What do you got?
Is it my go? Yeah.
Yes.
I was going to go with John Frum.
Oh, I haven't heard of that name in a while. That's an interesting one. All right. Tell me all about John Frum.
Honestly, I think they're one of the best bands out there. They haven't really, I don't think, released anything for quite some time. And it was like 2016 or 2017 that they last released an album. But it's Liam Wilson from Dillinger Escape Plan, Kenny Groholsky, who is in Imperial Triumphant and one of the best drummers of all time, and Derek Rydquist as well, who is now in the Zenith Passage, but used to be in the Faceless and all that sort of stuff. And it's just like, we were just saying how everything's like mega, mega evil. I think this is like the most twisted, psychedelic, weird death metal that's ever kind of been there. It's kind of like Deathspell Omega, like you can hear similarities with like Imperial Triumphant and all that sort of stuff. But for me, it was kind of like one of the first ones that I thought of, when you asked to do this collaboration. I was like, oh yeah, John Frum is like definitely up there. I love that band so much. And it's just, there's a lot more progressive aspects that I thought, I kind of thought it was going to be a bit more straightforward, almost like another supergroup, which is Living Gate, especially because it's on Relapse and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I thought it was going to be kind of more entombed-y kind of vibes. And then that single came out and I was just like, wow, this is like nothing I've heard before in a very, very long time.
I remember this album, actually, A Stirring in the News, like 2017. I remember, I think at that point I wasn't as into like a lot of more experimental, like avant-garde kind of metal. And that at the time, like just felt a little too weird for me, but like, I haven't thought of it in a while. And I did not know that the drummer from Imperial Triumphant was in there. Like that has me excited. That makes me want a new John Frum record, straight up. I don't even remember the band. And yeah, I mean, Derek Rydquist from the Zenith Passage and the Faceless. I mean, Liam Wilson. I mean, anytime you have someone from Dillinger Escape Plan, it's almost guaranteed to be awesome. No, that sounds awesome. I'm definitely gonna have to recheck that out. I remember checking it out way back in the day, but I don't think it ever really resonated with me.
Well, it's a pretty dense record, to be fair. Like, it's not a record that I kind of go back and I sort of listen to loads. But it's one of those ones where, like you've got that itch that you really want to scratch and it's only that kind of thing. But it's like, I think that's kind of what laid the foundations for me with like Imperial Triumphant and things like that, where it is, like really kind of unlistenable. Some of it, it's pretty full on. Like
you're telling me you don't throw on Alphaville and Spirit of Ecstasy at the family barbecue? You won't be jamming that Christmas night, opening up presents and carving turkey?
That's exactly what I'm going to do, man. Like Mercurial Gilded, I think it is. Like, yeah, we're just going to like prog out on the sax. Everyone's going to bring their eyes wide shut kind of regalia as well.
Bro, throw on the song that has Kenny G on them and just tell them it's a Kenny G song.
Yeah.
Tell them Kenny G got real fucked up for this one.
But yeah, it is a weird band. And it's just such a great, like the musicianship is just unbelievable. And I know it's a bit of an obscure one, but I was like, oh yeah, definitely have to mention that one for sure. That's one of my favorites.
Hell yeah. I'm definitely gonna have to recheck out John Frum. It's been a very long time. I'm gonna bring up another supergroup, another more obvious one, but in my opinion, if we're talking best metal supergroups, you almost have to bring them up. They're one of the few supergroups that's actually been around for a bit at this point. Like they've managed to make it work despite having a bunch of different people kind of come and go from the band. Swedish death metal supergroup Bloodbath, which over the course of its career has featured members of Opeth, Catatonia, Paradise Lost, everyone from Nick Holmes to Dan Swano to the legendary Michael Ackerfeld as well. I mean, by no means anything revolutionary as far as like the Swedish death metal sound, but I mean, they've kind of just mastered it. Like the best bits and pieces of Entombed, Grave, Early at the Gates. Like it's so fucking grim and sinister, and like the music just is so dark. And I feel like every time I listen to a Bloodbath album, I'm scraping away scabs and bugs and God knows whatever else. I mean, with Nick Holmes especially, I mean, I know a lot of people just want to listen to the couple of records with Michael Ackerfeld. I get it. But like also like the Nick Holmes stuff is so good. Like I feel like it's actually gotten darker and almost has a bit of like a black metal underbelly to it at times with the Nick Holmes era.
Yeah, big time, man. Like I think I was really quite surprised at how kind of horrific he could sound, because obviously he's kind of known for the crooning of Paradise Lost, and he does, a bit of screaming here and there. But like, I remember whacking on Grand Morbid Funeral and just thinking, like, what is this? Like, I did not expect this in the slightest. But yeah, like you say, it's kind of death metal elite. They were definitely on my list as well. Like, Michael Ackerfeld's growls, and I think it was also cool to see kind of Ackerfeld do something which is just kind of straight up death metal instead of kind of the Opethian kind of like sort of thing, like, which I love, like Opeth are one of my favorite bands of all time. But yeah, that was really, really cool. And like you said, it does actually have a bit of a black metal like undertone to it, because I think the last album, oh no, I'm thinking of The Arrow of Satan is Drawn, but there's one more album after that, isn't there, which I think was on Napalm Records.
Yes, Survival of the Sickest.
That's it. I will be honest, I haven't listened to that one. So I've only listened to it like once or twice, so I'm not all that familiar with it. But sort of, yeah, the Arrow of Satan is Drawn and Grand Morbid Funeral, they're kind of like ones that I really like. And of course, the one with all the like people who are like proper emaciated on the Fathomless Mastery, that's a wicked album. But they've just got so many quality records, to be fair. And like some of the lyrical stuff, like Eaton, what a thing to like,
Fucking for an awesome song.
You know what I mean? Like
fantastic.
And the lyrics are just like, they're horrific, but also kind of amazing at the same time, Yeah,
it almost occupies that kind of like cattle decapitation territory where it's like, all right, this is, it's a little smarter than it maybe has the right to be. Like it's
yeah.
Like it's great too, because like Bloodbath, I mean, they've had people come and go from the band over the years, but like since Nick Holmes specifically joined over the course of the past 10 years, they've gone on a couple tours, they've dropped 3 albums. They're a pretty stable band at this point. Like they're one of the few supergroups that, I mean, Paradise Lost is a busy band. Catatonia is a pretty busy band. Like these are not small fry bands where it's like, oh, now they're coming together. Like these guys, these are bands that have been around for 30 years at this point, maybe even longer, and they've dropped like 20 fucking albums each, and they all have their own schedules. And Nick Holmes, I mean, he's also like got other stuff. Like he's got this other project, Host, which is like a new wave, kind of like dark wave, 80s pop kind of thing with Greg McIntosh, also from Paradise Lost. So like they've all got shit, and somehow Bloodbath is able to just kind of figure it out,
Yeah, man. But like you said, I think it kind of probably scratches those kind of itches, so that you kind of keep Catatonia sounding kind of like Catatonia, and you've got that sort of like buzzsaw guitar sound that you want in Bloodbath. But yeah, they are just like one of the best. And it actually, yeah, you're absolutely right. I hadn't thought of the level of output that they've had, but really, when you actually think about it, they are almost like another band rather than just another supergroup. But the songwriting is just unreal, man. Like, yeah, they're one of the best.
Yeah, like I mean, like the debut EP comes out 2000, and then like 2 more albums 2 years later or 4 years later, an album and an EP in 2008. A bit of a hiatus because I guess we're trying to figure out what Michael Ackerfeld wants to do, and he decides he's not really interested in death metal anymore, so Nick gets brought in. But yeah, I mean, again, from 2014 onwards, they're pretty active. And if we're being honest, 6 years isn't that big of a time gap, especially if you come back roaring. I mean, look at Job for a Cowboy. They've been gone for 10 fucking years. And it's like, I don't know, man. Like it can be difficult when you're gone for that long. And Bloodbath at this point, they're like part of the old death. It feels like they're just part of the old death metal guard at this point. It just feels like they've been here forever because in a way they have.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. They are just kind of like part of the furniture, or like part of the crypt. You know, that's sort of I don't know, they just nail the atmosphere as well. That's another thing I think, is that they have that Swedish feel, but there's, you know, with Nick being in the band a little bit more now, there's that sort of slight gothicness to it as well, but it's still just as abrasive. It's awesome, man. Yeah, for sure.
Hell yeah. Another super group for us, Tristan. What do you got?
Okay. So they're kind of like, you know, not the biggest supergroup, and they are quite new, but I had Umbra Vitae on my list.
That's an excellent choice. I kind of had them on mine as well.
Yeah, man. Like,
that's,
you know,
okay.
I think, you know, I love the Red Chord, and I really, really, really hope that they will come back at some point and, you know, absolutely destroy everyone. But until then, you know, we've got Jake Bannon from Converge. We've got, I can't remember the actual individual members that are in there, but I think it's the guitarist, right?
Sean Martin from Twitching Tongues and Hatebreed, Greg Weeks also from the Red Chord, and John Rice, who's been in 100 bands, but at the current moment, he's a member of Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats. Also a Job for a Cowboy, actually. Is he still in that band? It says here he is.
I was going to say, that's what kind of did that
but he is known for his contributions for Job for a Cowboy, and I know he's also done session work and live work for like Behemoth, Revocation, literally hundreds of fucking bands. I remember he was in like a hard rock band, Scorpion Child, for a bit too.
Yes. Yeah, man. Yeah. I met him when he was in Scorpion Child once, and like, yeah, such a lovely dude. But I think the thing that struck me with Umbra Vitae is like, I was kind of like, oh, it's only, because I feel like the record's only like 25 minutes or something like that. But I'm like, it is some of the most vicious stuff I've heard in a long time. And I feel like they were just kind of, especially with Jacob Bannon, like they were just like, just go as feral as possible, because he just sounds like a rabid animal. It's so cool. But they have that sort of like, you know, those sort of melodies and those chords, which are almost like suspended in animation kind of thing. And they just hang there for that little second longer. And then it just comes in and fucking pummels you completely. It's really interesting. And again, you know, it doesn't sound like a combination of all of these bands. It sounds like something completely different that no one would have ever kind of thought of putting together.
I love the like, I feel like the album in a weird way has like a grindcore element to it because it's so intense and there's so many like churning, grinding, pummeling riffs and beats, and Jacob's just absolutely demented, unhinged fucking vocals. I mean, duh, it's Jacob Bannon. But I also love that he's able to bring in some of the more thought-provoking, introspective kind of lyricism that he's known for with like Converge and Where Your Wounds into Umbra Vitae, which I feel like it gives them a little bit more depth and personality. Like it's not like no disrespect to Bloodbath, but it's not like Bloodbath where it's like, we're a Swedish death metal band, that's what we do. With Umbra Vitae, it's like, no, we've got a little bit more going on, you know. There's a little bit of spice in there. It's not spicy, but there's a little bit of spice in there.
Yeah, man, it just keeps things interesting, and again, you know, it is sort of taking pieces from those other bands and then putting it through a different lens, which maybe, you know, he might not be able to in Converge, or, you know, so sometimes I think bands can kind of get not stuck in a certain way because of fans or anything like that, because I think, you know, any band you speak to, they'll be like, oh well, you know, we play what we want to play, and if people are fans of it, then great. But I think surely subconsciously you must be kind of like, okay, well, we have to sort of like, you know, write a riff and then make it sound a little bit more like that. Whereas if you're in a supergroup, you know, you can do something completely different that, you know, people may not necessarily expect of you. And that's what I think is one of the really cool things about supergroups, for sure.
Yeah, because like you have the freedom to kind of like, I mean, in the case of Umbra Vitae, you have the Red Chord and Hatebreed and Converge, and like looking at that, like surface level, like my brain goes, oh, so it's going to be like some like mathcore, metalcore kind of shit. Got it. And then you listen to the album and it's like, no, noisy, cavernous, pounding death metal with some elements of some of those bands, sure, but definitely like, I don't know, definitely not like Kill or Be Killed, where it's like, oh, I get it. I can hear a little bit of the Soulfly. I can hear a little bit of the Mastodon. With this, it's like, nah, like if unless you're actively looking for that converged influence, you're not gonna find it. Like straight the fuck up, you're just not.
Yeah, man, absolutely.
All right, I guess that brings it to me, and I'm gonna go where I had a little list here. Where'd it go? I'm gonna go with another kind of like punk metal super group that exists on a similar kind of plane of existence to Umbra Vitae. But big emphasis on super group with this one, because the talent is pretty fucking super. You have Dead Cross, American crossover thrash, hardcore, punk, extreme metal super group. Any one of these labels applies perfectly. You have Justin Pearson, who's in a bunch of fucking bands, Death Club, Head Wound City, Retox, probably best known for his work with the Locusts, though. You have Mike Crane, also from Retox. You have Mike Patton, Faith No More, Mr. Bungle on lead vocals, and the one and only Dave Lombardo on drums. I mean, Suicidal Tendencies, Testament, also Mr. Bungle, Grip Inc., The Misfits. Also, just in case you didn't know, he was in this band called Slayer back in the day. I don't know, just in case anyone out there didn't know.
I was waiting for that one. I was like, is he going to say Slayer?
Yeah, just not mention Slayer at all. I mean, at this point, you could. He's been in so many fucking bands. He's kind of like Gene Hoglan in that sense, where it's like, nah, he's just been in so many fucking bands. You don't have to name the OG one. You don't have to name the one that made him big.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, look, Empire State Bastard. You know, that literally was
another
like,
project. Come to think of it, yeah.
Which,
and he even did a solo album like earlier in the year, Rites of Percussion or something like that.
Oh, okay. See, yeah, I literally, as we were having that conversation, I was like, oh yeah, Empire State Bastard. Why didn't I think of that? But yeah, no, like I'm not, I will admit, I'm not massively familiar with Dead Cross, but you know, if you put Mike Patton and Dave Lombardo together, for me, that's a pretty award-winning combination.
Those two are like best buddies at this point too, because like between not just Dead Cross, but also Phantom Ass back in the day, and now they're in Mr. Bungle, like it's like they're just best buddies. I'm ready for Slayer 2.0, but instead of like Kerry King and Tom Araya, it's fucking Mike Patton. Like, fuck it, why not? And that's what's really cool about Dead Cross is with Dave Lombardo, I mean, he's been hanging out with the Misfits and Suicidal Tendencies, so we already know he's got that punk side to him. But for Mike Patton, who's been primarily doing like more experimental alternative metal stuff, Dead Cross is where he just fucking goes apeshit. Like, he just turns into a radical leftist snotty punk bastard. Like, it's kind of awesome to watch. Like, there's some really rabid stuff on the Dead Cross albums, and it's very political and it's very intense. And like, you know, he no holds, like, he does not hold back even in the slightest. If you are ever so slightly in his way, he will not simply push you to the side. He will probably bulldoze you on that album.
Yeah, man. It's you know, you can't deny his level of drumming though. That's the thing is no matter what he puts his name to, you know, there's going to be that signature Lombardo level of groove and like that. Just that sheer powerhouse. But I'll definitely have to give them more of a listen. But yeah, being completely honest with you, man, I'm not all that familiar with them, to be fair.
No worries. I hope this provides, just like how you provided a gateway for John Frum, hopefully I provided a gateway for Dead Cross.
Yeah, absolutely, man, for sure.
This is definitely another band where I'm like, oh, please, like, they don't tour, but I want them to tour so fucking bad. I want to see Dead Cross in a shitty fucking, like, dive bar, just pounding shit, just destroying shit.
Yeah, man, you can't see these guys in like a big kind of, like what they would normally in their. I
don't want to see them opening for fucking Metallica. I don't want to see them like on an opening for the Misfits. I want to see them in a shitty bar. And I want to drink shitty whiskey, and I want to get really mad at the world for 30 minutes while they just blast away.
So I guess it's over to me for another pick, is it?
Over to you then, bud. Yes.
So I'm going to go with probably one which is kind of, maybe a bit predictable, but it's the Damned Things. I
haven't thought about that band in a while either.
Yeah, man. That's the thing. They had that album. I think it was called Ironoclast, which was are honestly amazing. So if you're not familiar with Damn Things, it's Keith Buckley from Every Time I Die, and his new band is called Many Eyes, I think. And then,
yes, it is. Yes.
is that right? Yeah. And you've got Joe Troman from Fall Out Boy, Scott Ian of Anthrax, Andy Hurley, who's also the drummer from Fall Out Boy, and a massive black metal fan, which I didn't realize. And then I feel like there's another guy from Anthrax in there. But anyway.
There's, yes, actually, sorry to interrupt. Rob Caggiano, who was also a guitarist for Volbeat up until like earlier this year.
Right. Okay. See but that's the thing, you know, like I don't, whenever I'm like on any channel or anything like that, I never claim to know anything, like, you know, everything, like, you know, you're only human at the end of the day. Like, and yeah, I just
no, you're not allowed to make mistakes. How dare you?
I'll be cancelled forever. Yeah, no, like it's really cool. It kind of leans into that more sort of like bluesy sort of rock and roll side that I think Keith Buckley had with Every Time I Die, R.I.P. That was a whole mess.
That's got to be like one of the messiest, weirdest band breakups ever. Oh my God. Like,
I know.
I'm not even like the biggest fan of Every Time I Die, and I remember being like shook when that happened because I was like, whoa, like, aren't you guys brothers? Like, what the fuck is going on?
Yeah, I know, man. It was pretty messy, and I think it was just the sort of lack of communication of each sort of side of it. But I guess, you know, it did lead us to Better Lovers, which is another super group, and you know,
Speak of the Devil, yeah, with I think it's one of the guys from Fit for an Autopsy, and also Greg from Dillinger Escape Plan.
Yeah, this is the thing, though. I think, you know, a lot of these bands kind of it often works around sort of like the scene. Like, you know, you said Mike Patton and Dave Lombardo are really good friends. It's just, I think, friends kind of hanging out and jamming. And one of the cool things for the Damned Things is I didn't realize how much kind of, especially the two Fall Out Boy guys, are really into hardcore metal and all that sort of stuff. Because I mean, this album was released like quite a long time ago. They did release another album, but it wasn't quite as sort of good as that level. And then obviously Scott Ian, you know, he's like a riff machine. You know, it's a match made in heaven as far as I'm concerned.
It's also interesting because like Damn Things is like 2010s ish, and I mean, up until this year, Fall Out Boy was playing like pretty radio friendly kind of stadium pop and rock music. So like, the fact that they would then go to Damned Things and be like, yeah, man, let's just blast some fucking metal and hardcore shit. Like that's pretty cool. It's almost like that. It almost kind of reads as like that being their outlet for the music they couldn't play with like Fall Out Boy. And because Fall Out Boy was going like so much more intensely pop, they said, all right, let's go so much more intensely punk.
Yeah, man, absolutely. But like, you know, Andy, he's in a band called Race Traitor, and also I want to say that he's in Sect as well. And these are like proper heavy bands, man. So, you know, and I remember I saw Fall Out Boy because my wife Laura absolutely adores them, like her favorite band of all time. And in one of the sort of like interludes, they did Hammer Smashed Face, which was nuts. Like literally, he was just like,
fuck yeah, why not?
I was just like, what's going on here? It's like a drum solo into Hammer Smash Face. I was like, oh, well, he definitely must know his death metal for sure. But yeah, that would probably be my pick. I think, you know, it's a really interesting band, and it you know, again, plays to all the strengths of the individual members, but brings something completely new to the fold.
Are they active anymore? It says here they aren't. They had an album in 2019, and after that, they called it quits.
What's the album called? I can't remember what that new album was called. I don't think they.
Ironiclast in 2010, and then High Crimes in 2019.
Oh, okay, yeah. That's the one with the like the scribbling on the wall and stuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
See, that one wasn't it. I don't know. The spark wasn't quite as much there. I think it was still a good album, but not as good as Ironiclast, I thought.
I think that this is definitely a case of like everyone just got too busy. I mean, the Every Time I Die situation got messy, and obviously Anthrax and Fall Out Boy and Volbeat are all big name fucking bands. Like Rob Caggiano isn't even on the second album. So yeah, this is definitely a supergroup situation where everyone just got too busy and it just made sense to part ways. Like logistically, it's just not going to happen again.
Yeah, man, for sure.
All right. And yeah, all right, my turn then. Cool. I kind of lost track of shit for a minute. I am going with a band that happens to be one of my favorite bands, and they kind of accidentally became a supergroup, I mean, they started off with some talent, don't get me wrong, but I'd say right now, specifically, they're a supergroup. I'm going Mutoid Man, American sludge metal, hard rock, speed metal crew. So they're a mix of all kinds of different stuff. They're erratic, they're crazy, they're wild. You got Ben Kohler on drums from All Pigs Must Die, the aforementioned Killer Be Killed, and the aforementioned Converge. There's a lot of Converge in general in this video, I'm noticing. Stephen Brodsky, Old Man Gloom, Cave In, also very briefly a member of Converge. And at the moment, their bassist is Grammy Award-winning bassist Jeff Matz from High on Fire.
Oh, cool.
And I mean, everything Mutoid Man has just made me, like, I love Mutoid Man. One of the best live bands I've ever fucking seen. Like, I've always kind of described their sound to some people as like if Mastodon tried to do a pop punk album, because you have these like massive hooks and melodies, but it's like really sludgy, but it's got like a lot of momentum and enthusiasm to it. You'll have these old school heavy metal gallops, these more math rock kind of sections. Like, it's just fucking wild, and it's so much fun. The 2017's Warmones is still like one of my favorite albums from them. They did one earlier this year, which I'm not immediately remembering the name of, Mutants. That was great as well. Helium Head, they did a covers EP, Bleeder. This is another band that's been pretty active throughout the past decade. Like, another band that maybe not as big as some of the other ones we've mentioned, like Heaven and Hell, Killer Be Killed, but like they've managed to make the schedule work pretty well. They're also the house band for 2 Minutes to Late Night.
No way.
Yeah.
Oh,
and they're all massively talented, and I would love to have them on the Metal Meltdown one day if they answer my emails.
Hint, hint. Yeah,
wink,
man.
Wink, nudge, nudge.
I mean, anything Stephen Brodsky touches, I think, is gold. Like, he's such a fantastic musician all around. And like you said, Jeff Matz, High on Fire, like, Ben Collar as well. They're just, it's kind of an unbeatable thing. And even, in that same sentence, Old Man Gloom, like another great band, very, very different, but, kind of, I think they all kind of weirdly exist in this sort of nebulous, converge-y sort of world where, again, they're able to kind of do their own thing and kind of vent out, like you said, that sort of pop punky sort of aesthetic, I guess. But yeah, I've listened to a few Mutoid Man tracks, but like, I think for some reason it wasn't like clicking with me at the time. And there's been so many bands like that over the years, like Neurosis was one of them. I was kind of like, every song just sounds the fucking same. And then I feel like you hit 30 and then you end up like, or you're about to hit 30 and you have to love post metal and like, bands like ISIS and all that sort of stuff. It's almost like a prerequisite. And then you get like denim jackets and all this sort of stuff.
I definitely will say that like I've only found that I've cared about post metal as I've gotten older. Like when I was 18, when I was like 17, 18, it's like, no, thrash and grind and death metal all the way. If it's not Slayer or Napalm Death, I don't give a shit. And now I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm looking forward to the new fucking the whatever the fuck record, avant-garde jazz post metal shit. So yeah, there's what's cool about Mutoid Man too, for me, is that like all of these bands, Cave In, Old Man Gloom, Converge, they're not known for making the most uplifting music. It's not music I would consider fun, quote unquote. Whereas with Mutoid Man, like, it's just fun. Like, it has this old school rock, punk, metal kind of spirit. All these different influences, all these different ideas, consistently unpredictable. And again, seeing them live is awesome. I saw them here in Toronto at like literally a dive bar, like the kind of dive bar I want to see Dead Cross in.
Yeah.
The Hard Luck Bar, and they just rock the fucking joint to pieces. Like, they talked about opening for Baroness in that same show, and I'm like, I don't want to see these guys open for anyone. I just like, they're too good. You're gonna outplay whoever you fucking open for. Like, no disrespect to Baroness, but like, you're just doomed. You're doomed.
Yeah, man. But I think that's the thing is it is just people having fun, and that it kind of goes back to that thing of, the smaller circle with all of their friends. And I think you can really kind of tell when a band is just like jamming, and especially when they're of the caliber of like, Stephen Brodsky, Ben Collar and all that sort of stuff, like they can just jam and it sound really, really, really good and be fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
All right,
man.
hell yeah. I think we've mentioned about 4 each. Do we want to make it 5 each and then call it a day?
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I'm just like, oh shit, which one am I going to end with? Um, I think
No pressure.
is it over? Yeah, it's over to me now, isn't it? Yeah.
Correct.
Let's do Giraffe Tongue Orchestra.
Ooh, I like Giraffe Tongue Orchestra. I wish they would release another album.
Yeah, me
Right.
too, man.
I'm gonna just
Like,
chime in with that right off the bat. I'll let you. This is your pick, so I'm gonna let you take over.
no, it's all good, man. Yeah, Broken Lines was like such an amazing album, and there's again that sort of kind of Venn diagram of all of the influences, like Alice in Chains, Mastodon, Mars Volta, and for a long time I wasn't really kind of, again, similar to the post metal thing. I was like, oh, Mars Volta is just kind of like noise and people just kind of jam in and stuff, and then I realized how great they were, and it's just like the level of musicianship on this is so good, and it's combined with that level of accessibility as well, which I think comes from like William Duval, and like Brent Hines is just like a beast on guitar as well, and it's just amazing, and I just really would like to hear some new material because it's been quite some time, and also it sort of scratched a bit of that like Dillinger itch as well, because I feel like they were either not sort of like doing much or they'd already broken up when this was released. I can't remember actually when it was released at all.
So this was released 2016. Dissociation, the band's final album, would come out the next year.
Oh, okay.
I want to point is interesting little fun fact. This is the second supergroup we've talked about that features members of Mastodon, Dillinger Escape Plan, and the Mars Volta. all these guys were best friends at a certain point, I guess. It's also like you have Pete Griffin from Def Clock on bass. At one point, Juliette Lewis, the actress, was singing for the band as well, which I think is really interesting. Eric cool. Avery from Jane's Addiction apparently was on bass at one point too. So there's a lot of talent coming in and out of this band. And I'm gonna have to go re-listen to that album, but I remember really, really liking it. Like, it just had this kind of like really angular, unorthodox kind of like feel and flow to it. Like, I don't even know how to describe it. It definitely didn't have much Alice in Chains in it, but it was cool to see William Duvall kind of like stretch his wings a bit. Because I feel like even though he's kind of supposed to fill in for Lane Staley, I feel like Alice in Chains is kind of the Jerry Cantrell show. Like, he just does so much of it himself now.
Yeah, for sure.
Which I understand on some level, but it's also like, I want to hear William. Like, he's a talented guy. Give him a chance,
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, and like we've been saying kind of throughout this whole thing, is that it allows him to explore something that he wouldn't necessarily be able to in the sort of the Alice in Chains box, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I totally get what you mean. Like, it was kind of like a bit left field. Some of it was like, oh, I really didn't expect it to sound like that, because I'm sure that people are just, guilty of doing this by association, because you're like, okay, well, it sounds like Dillinger. It has Dillinger, Mastodon, Mars Volta. It's probably going to sound like this. And then it sounds something completely different, which I think is actually often really, really cool, because it's a complete left turn from what you would have expected, basically. But yeah, so that's definitely one of, I think, the best super groups, and hopefully they will come back. I mean, it's almost been 10 years since. Yeah, what come next year?
Yeah, we're 7, 8 years or so. So yeah, and I mean, Alice in Chains is a busy band. Mastodon's a busy band. Yeah. So it's kind of like, it'd be cool if they came back, but I'm not going to bet any money on it. You know what I mean?
Me neither, man. I'll just keep praying to the gods in the sky. I mean, if we got Dillinger back, that would be.
That's true. If Dillinger can come back, then that in and of itself is I'm curious to see how that turns out, if there's any more shows that come out of that. I considered going down to Brooklyn for those shows, but by the time I even had a chance to get tickets, they were all sold out, all 3 shows.
Really? Shit.
Oh,
man.
Yeah, they sold out fast. Like, it's weird to see a metal show sell out that fast. Let's put it that way. Like, even like when fucking Metallica and Guns N' Roses come through here, like, those tickets don't even sell that fucking fast. Like, Taylor Swift levels of ticket selling speed. Like, it went quick. It was fucking insane. All right, and I guess that brings it to me for my final choice. There's plenty of other bands we could bring up, but I want to end with a band that I've mentioned a couple of times. I think they're a severely, severely underrated group. They also only have one album, but screw it. I'm going with Airion, French-Canadian technical progressive death metal supergroup. And if you're familiar with any kind of death metal, you're definitely familiar with everyone in this band. You've got Mike DeSalvo on lead vocals, from Coma Cluster Void, former lead singer for Cryptopsy. You've got Rob Milley from Necrotic Mutation, Phobochasm, Neuraxis. Tommy McKinnon on drums, who's got a former member of Augury. He's also in a band called Conflux. Oliver Pinard on bass from Cattle Decapitation, alto of Cryptopsy. And collaborating across the album, you have Lord Worm, also of Cryptopsy, and Luc Lemay of Gorguts fame contributes some orchestral elements and some songwriting as well. So this is just kind of like a big French-Canadian death metal collaborative record, like a lot of big names from the scene. And what I think is interesting about this record is that the only album they've done come forth to me was in production over the course of nearly a decade. And a lot happened in that time span. Like, the album kind of unintentionally serves as a tribute to Mike DeSalvo's wife, who had passed away during the production of the record, specifically battling cancer. And she actually has some vocal contributions to the record as well, which definitely kind of like be bitter and serene and also touching because of that. And I mean, you have like some records that have like some more obscene and even satirical moments, but there's also a lot of stuff where like there's a song called there's a song, Bed Sores and something. I'm forgetting the exact title off the top of my head, but it essentially talks about how like someone laying in a hospital bed for so long that they're like dying in the hospital bed. Like they have bed sores and they're just in even more agony and pain. And it wasn't written with her experience in mind, with the passing of the wife in mind. But with that knowledge, I think it becomes even more poignant and even more like provocative and touching. Like it's a record that took a long time to make, and there's a real sense of like brotherhood between all the guys and like community and love. And then it also has this added layer of like, damn, someone really important died during the production of this. So now there's even more depth and meaning to the music.
Wow. I have to say, wholeheartedly, I've never heard of this band. So this is definitely some education for me, man. So
that's the case for a lot of people. I've mentioned this before. We did a top 10 best Canadian death metal albums video earlier in the year, and I brought it up. I've consistently talked about Airion being very underrated. I remember this was one of my favorite albums of 2020. I think we actually interviewed Mike DeSalvo here on the Metal Meltdown. That was one of the first big interviews I kind of did. Mm-hmm. I still think this record is just fantastic. And literally all the best elements of all the bands I just mentioned, like Cryptopsy, some Gorguts, like crushing riffs, some great orchestral arrangements and elements, a lot of great vocal harmonies between Mike and, I'm going to look up her name so I don't just say his wife over and over. I believe her name was Genevieve. Yes, Jen DeSalvo. There's a lot of great like vocal stuff between the two of them, kind of playing off of each other that makes it even more interesting. And it's powerful and it's brutal and it's uncompromising. It's one of those rare death metal albums that has just as much heart as it does muscle.
Okay. Is it kind of, does it sound similar to, because you mentioned Cryptopsy quite a bit, is it kind of that sort of like super full on kind of sound, or is there a bit more, obviously with the orchestral kind of arrangements and things like that, is it a bit more kind of bit more open rather than just like pummeling you?
There's definitely elements of Cryptopsy, especially the Mike DeSalvo era of Cryptopsy, but I'd say this has more in common with Neuraxis and Gorguts than it does Cryptopsy.
Oh, awesome. Because I love Neuraxis. Like Asylum is such a brilliant record. And obviously, Gorguts, like Pleiades Dust, Colored Sands, I think is one of my favorite albums of all time. Like they can't put a foot wrong. So
I can't argue with that. I mean, I've always been an Obscura guy, but I do love Colored Sands as well.
There's something about it, man. Like I think it's the Kevin Hufnagel and all that sort of stuff, like kind of that sort of suspended guitar and then that Battle of Chamdo in the middle. It's just, it's so cool, man. But I'll definitely be listening to that for sure. I'm really excited actually to listen to that for sure.
Yeah, literally anytime I talk, like it's a severely underrated album. I don't know if there's plans for a follow-up. I think because it took so long to make that album and because there was so much tragedy behind the scenes, I think that they're kind of like, we're fine with this being a one-off, and they're all busy with all their other bands. I mean, again, Oliver the bassist is in Cattle Decapitation, so he's busy. Cryptopsy's finally got a new album out as well, so it's like, all right. And Mike has Coma Cluster Void, and I think a couple other smaller projects. So it's a one and done kind of thing for the most part, but it is a fantastic one and done.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll check it out, man. Thanks for the recommendation.
You're very welcome. And I guess that does it for us, folks. We've been recording for close to an hour, and I assume you want to go spend Christmas with your family. So, you know.
It's all right, man. You know, it's been a death metal themed Christmas so far. So
hell yes. Best Christmas, in my opinion.
Yeah,
all right,
man.
folks. Thank you for joining us for Best Metal Supergroups. Feel free to tell us about any bands that we missed in the comments. Lord knows there's a couple. Like, I guess, like, I don't know. I thought about bringing up End, like a metalcore supergroup with like a bunch of big names in there. Like, fucker from Counterparts, another Twitching Tongues guy. I also thought about Ultimus with Morbid Angel, Cryptopsy, Flo from Cryptopsy as well.
Oh yeah, man. Oh my God, there's so many that like, yeah. So some of the ones I had was Palms, Brujeria, what Roadrunner United was like a bit of a sort of like get out of jail free card.
I kind of thought about bringing up Probot as well, not gonna lie. Probot, which I guess, you know what, we can get, that's fuck it, Probot, why not? Like, because like that's another one where I'm like, this is just underrated and more people need to know about it. But you know what, fuck it, honorable mention Probot. It's Dave Grohl doing heavy metal with members of fucking Venom and Voivod and DRI and Napalm Death. Definitely check it out.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me on the channel as well, man. And you know, I'd absolutely love to do some more if you're up for it, mate.
Oh hell yeah! I'm a open book, man. Especially in January, I'll be slow as shit in January. Restaurants die down big time.
I'll be hibernating.
Hell yeah! Subscribe to the Metal Tris if y'all somehow have not already. Subscribe to the Metal Meltdown if you have not done so already. We're recording this before Christmas, but it's gonna probably come out after. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.